On July 20, 2026, Paramount was about to complete the biggest merger Hollywood had ever seen. Then a federal judge stopped it. 2 days later, Europe approved it. And every day the deal remains unfinished after September 30th could cost Paramount roughly $7 million. This is not just a merger anymore. It is a race against the courts, a race against the calendar, and a test of whether one billionaire can rebuild old Hollywood before the deal collapses under its own weight. At the center is David Ellison. He is trying to combine Paramount and Warner Bros. Discovery in a transaction valued at $110 billion, including debt. If he wins, he will control a media empire stretching from CBS and CNN to HBO Max, Paramount Plus, DC, Nickelodeon, and Warner Bros. If he loses, Paramount could be left with billions in fees and a very public failure. But the real question is bigger. Is Ellison building the company that can save legacy Hollywood? Or is he creating something too powerful to allow? In August 2025, Ellison's Skydance completed its takeover of Paramount. He inherited one of the most famous names in entertainment. He also inherited a company with serious problems. Cable television was shrinking. Streaming was burning cash. Viewers were scattered across dozens of platforms, and Paramount was competing against companies with deeper pockets and greater global reach. Ellison's message was simple. Paramount did not need to become smaller. It needed to become dangerous again. Then, before that transformation was even finished, he made a move almost no one expected. He went after Warner Bros. Discovery. Warner owned Warner Bros. Pictures, HBO, CNN, Discovery, DC, TNT Sports, and a streaming business with nearly 132 million subscribers. Buying it would not merely expand Paramount. It would redraw the map of Hollywood. But Warner was vulnerable. The company had been created in 2022 when Discovery combined with Warner Media. The deal created scale, but also a mountain of debt and a complicated mix of businesses moving in opposite directions. HBO and streaming were growing. Traditional cable was fading. Warner needed a solution. By late 2025, Netflix appeared to have one. It agreed to buy Warner's studios, HBO, and HBO Max, while the cable networks would be separated. For a moment, Netflix looked like the winner of one of the most important bidding wars in media history. Then, Ellison stepped in. He did not want part of Warner. He wanted all of it. Paramount raised its offer, strengthened its guarantees, and promised cash for the entire company. Warner's board changed sides. Netflix was out. Paramount was in. But winning came with an extraordinary price. Warner owed Netflix $2.8 billion for abandoning the agreement. Paramount paid it. Then, Paramount offered another $7 billion as a regulatory termination fee if the acquisition failed under certain conditions. Before it owned one Warner studio, one subscriber, or one superhero franchise, Paramount had already put billions on the line. That was not just confidence, it was a warning. Ellison intended to close this deal at almost any cost. On February 27th, the companies announced the agreement. Paramount would pay $31 in cash for every Warner share. The equity was valued at about $81 billion. Including debt, the total enterprise value reached $110 billion. To finance the takeover, Paramount assembled roughly $47 billion in new equity, backed by the Ellison family and Redbird Capital, plus more than $50 billion in committed debt. And then came the promise that made the numbers work. More than $6 billion in annual synergies. Synergy can make an enormous acquisition sound clean and efficient. But in a merger this large, it usually means something else. Duplicate teams disappear. Technology systems are replaced. Offices close. And thousands of employees wonder whether their job is one of the savings. Paramount says the combination would make the business stronger. Both film studios would remain active and release at least 30 theatrical movies every year. Paramount Plus, HBO Max, and Pluto TV would sit inside the same company. The new group would have more content, subscribers, advertising inventory, and leverage against Netflix, Disney, Amazon, Apple, and YouTube. In Paramount's version of the story, this merger is not about eliminating competition. It is about surviving it. And that argument is not easy to dismiss. Streaming is brutally expensive. Cable revenue is declining. Movie studios are competing against technology companies with massive cash reserves and global platforms. A larger Paramount could spread its costs and negotiate from a stronger position. Warner shareholders agreed. On April 23rd, they approved the deal. Several major regulators cleared it. The finish line appeared close. Then 12 American states stepped in. Led by California, they sued to stop the merger. Their argument was the exact opposite of Paramount's. This deal would not create a stronger competitor. It would remove one. The states alleged that the combined company would control nearly 1/3 of widely released theatrical films in the United States, and a similar share of basic cable programming. It would also place CBS News and CNN under the same corporate parent. It could reduce the number of major buyers for scripts, employers for production workers, and companies deciding what reaches theaters and streaming platforms. The states were not only arguing about prices, they were arguing about power. On July 20th, District Judge Araceli Martinez-Olguin granted a temporary restraining order. Paramount could not close the deal. The ruling was not a final declaration that the merger was illegal, but it took away Ellison's biggest advantage: speed. Once two companies combine their employees, contracts, data, and technology, separating them becomes extraordinarily difficult. The judge stopped Paramount before the merger became a reality. Regulators could no longer easily reverse. Then, just 2 days later, the story flipped again. The European Commission conditionally approved the transaction. Europe required Paramount to leave its film distribution joint venture with Universal and avoid new European distribution arrangements with Universal for 10 years. That gave Paramount a powerful counterargument. Europe had examined the deal and concluded that specific conditions could solve the competition concerns. The American states were saying the opposite. They believed the problem was the combined company itself. And while those positions collide in court, another threat is growing. The contract contains a ticking fee. If the deal remains unfinished after September 30th, Warner shareholders begin receiving additional money. Across Warner's outstanding shares, the cost works out to roughly $7 million per day. 1 week could cost about $49 million. 1 month could add more than $200 million. The longer the merger remains frozen, the more expensive it becomes for Paramount to keep fighting. But the ticking fee may not be the biggest danger. Paramount expects the combined company to begin with debt equal to roughly 4.3 times its annual earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That estimate already assumes the promised savings are achieved. If the $6 billion in synergies arrive late, cost more than expected, or weaken the businesses they are meant to improve, the financial model becomes far more fragile. This is where the story becomes more than a legal battle. Ellison is trying to save two historic companies by combining them. But the size that could save them is the same size that could destroy the deal. Paramount says scale is the only way to compete with big tech. The The states say scale is how competition disappears. Both sides are looking at the same broken industry and reaching opposite conclusions. The next major court hearing is scheduled for August 3rd. If the judge extends the block, the merger could be delayed for months. Costs could climb. Financing could come under pressure. And Ellison's boldest move could begin to look less like a rescue and more like a gamble. If Paramount wins, Ellison could create one of the most powerful media companies in the world. But even then, the hardest part would only be beginning. He would still have to merge two enormous organizations, protect their strongest brands, deliver billions in savings, manage a huge debt load, and prove that bigger really does mean better. That is why this deal matters. It is not just about who owns Batman, CNN, HBO, or Mission. Impossible. It is about the future of entertainment itself. Can old Hollywood survive by building better companies? Or has the industry reached a point where survival simply means fewer companies controlling more of what the world watches? David Ellison has placed $110 billion on his answer. Now the courts will decide whether he is allowed to test it. Subscribe to Money, Lies, and Power for more stories about money, technology, and power.